Good to be here again with each of you. If you'd like to open to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. You know, there are a lot of interesting places that a person could visit in the world, and certainly there's many of them that I've wanted to go to. But there's one in particular that I've just always wanted to go to more than all the others. Since I was like a teenager, I've always wanted to visit this place called Prekestolen, which, as you can imagine, is not in the United States with a name like that. And it's found in Norway, and it is this small mountain or big hill, however you want to think of it, that is essentially, it's a 2-mile hike up onto the top of this mountain, but then when you get up there, there's this what people call essentially a transcended view. There's kind of this giant rock that juts out over a valley. And actually, that's sort of the ironic part, is Prekestolen means preacher's rock or pulpit rock. And I promise I don't want to go there because I'm a preacher. I wanted to go there long before I ever thought about being a preacher. But it's called pulpit rock because it looks like a pulpit. This rock juts out over this valley like a pulpit. And if you stand toward the edge of that, I mean, it looks like it would be a magnificent view. There's a river at the bottom of the valley, and you can just see forever and ever, and it's this sort of transcended place, they call it, that looks amazing. And you might think that you'd like to see something like that, but you might think that you'd really rather not make the 2-mile hike to the top. Especially some people just really don't like things like that. It's a lot of effort and a lot of struggle to get up there. And so you might be more interested in seeing it if you could just click on Google Maps, right? That's good enough for me, you might say. I don't want to go all the way up there. And or if you could climb it, but you didn't necessarily feel the climb. If you could get to the top, but it was almost like you were already there the whole time that you were going up. And you already had that transcended view even from the very bottom. And that is really the idea of Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12 is the very beginning of Jesus' first sermon in the book of Matthew. Matthew does a pattern. He has a story section, and then a sermon section, and then a story section, and then a sermon section. The first 4 chapters are the first story section, and it's setting up the idea that Jesus is the king that they have all been waiting for. He is the one that comes from David. He is the one that they've been expecting all this time. The first 4 chapters are trying to prove that, but in Matthew chapter 5, he's going to let Jesus start speaking for himself, and Jesus is going to give essentially his platform speech, right? If you're a politician and you're going to tell everyone, this is what it's like when I'm in power, Jesus says, when I'm king, this is what it's going to be like. And it starts off with that first word, blessed. When he's king, this is what it's going to be like, blessed. And so it starts in verse 1, and it says, seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. He has these multitudes. He wants to tell them something, and so he transcends. He goes up to the top of a mountain so that he can give them a perspective that they haven't had before. And so when he says blessed, the idea of blessed is essentially the idea of transcending. The first people who ever used the word blessed in the ancients, they used it only to talk about the pagan gods. And it's essentially this idea, we're here and we're struggling through the troubles of life. We're here and we're going through all these terrible things, and those gods, they have transcended. They are blessed. They are above the troubles of life. Later, they'd use it to talk about dead people, right? The only people who have transcended in their minds were those who are now in the realm of the gods. They are blessed. They're above the troubles of life. And then closer to Jesus' time, they would use it to talk about rich people, right? Rich people have transcended above the troubles of everyday life. That's kind of their idea. And so they're blessed. They're transcended. They're above everyday troubles. In fact, that's what the Jews thought. If you're blessed by God, then you're rich. And if you're poor, then you're not blessed by God. Only the rich are blessed. Only the rich are transcended above life's troubles. And so this is the context of what Jesus says when he says blessed, transcended, above life's troubles. Those are the people who will be in his kingdom. But his definition of what it means to be blessed or transcended is very different than what they were anticipating. And so they followed him up on that mountain. And this morning, I would like us to transcend with him, to go up on that mountain after them and see what it is that he describes when he says that we can also be blessed when we are a part of his kingdom and why he should be our king. And so he starts, and essentially, it says in verse 2, he opened his mouth and he taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And in this poem, every line is going to be essentially like the next level of a mountain. You're climbing up the mountain to get to the very top. And so he says, first, blessed are the poor in spirit. This is the idea that the people who are transcended above life's troubles, the people who are not bothered by life's troubles, the people who don't have to worry about life's troubles, are the people who he calls spiritual beggars. Right? They're the ones who recognize that they have no spiritual possessions on their own. They're the ones who recognize they're on the streets and they're wearing rags, spiritually speaking. They have no agency to get a job and make their spiritual situation better on their own. They're the ones who know that, spiritually speaking, they have nothing to offer God. Because of sin, they are separated from God, and there's no way to make that right on their own. And so he says, these are the people who know that, who have that kind of attitude, who recognize that about themselves. Those are the people who actually are able to transcend life's troubles. And, if you are a Jewish person in that time period, if you think about Matthew chapter 5 and verse 20, when he says to them, "I say to you, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." And so that's really the whole point of the Sermon on the Mount. He's going to tell them how they can be a part of God's kingdom, and how if you're doing it like the most righteous people of their time period, you're going to be missing the point. So if you're a scribe and a Pharisee, you hear that line, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," and you're thinking, wait a minute, that can't be right. The people who ascend above life's troubles, those are the people who are confident in themselves. Those are the people who are always doing what they would think of as the right thing and following the traditions of the elders and doing all these things, and they never make those mistakes. They have no reason to be poor in spirit, and Jesus would say that would seem the way it is, but it's not that way. If you really want to feel like you are above life's troubles, if you want to really feel like you've transcended above them, then the first step is to recognize the lowly position that you are in, spiritually speaking, to recognize your position in relationship with God. And so he says those people have this reward. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And essentially the idea is they'll be able to enter the kingdom. That's what he's teaching them about in 5:20. But also, they have all of the riches that a wealthy kingdom has. And spiritually speaking, they will have all of the riches of the wealthiest spiritual kingdom that ever existed. Those who recognize they can do nothing without God in order to enter the kingdom are the ones who will be allowed to enter and have all of the riches that come from a kingdom like that. And so even when they're in life's troubles, they'll know that they're a part of something that is rich beyond our imagination, and they can sort of transcend. They can be above those troubles, even in the middle of them. And that's the first. He's bringing us to the base of the mountain, but he wants us to keep climbing a little higher. And so in verse 4, he says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." And so again, he says, transcended, above life's problems, are people who mourn. And if you're a Pharisee and a scribe, you're saying, that can't be right. That doesn't make any sense. People who are essentially, he's talking about deep grievers. Mourning is the idea of someone who's wailing, someone who's weeping. If you've ever been in the fetal position on the floor crying about something, you have mourned to the level that Jesus is talking about here. That's the kind of mourning he's talking about. And people who are mourning, people who are at that low level, are in life's troubles. They're mourning because they have life's troubles. They're down there because life's troubles have brought them down. They cannot be above life's troubles. They're in life's troubles. And Jesus would say, it would seem that way, but in my kingdom, blessed, above life's troubles, are the people who are mourning, the people who look at their sins and they see them for what they really are, the people who aren't content to just sort of notice their sins, but to really think about them and try to see them how God sees them, to really think about them until they are torn up on the inside, to really think about them until they are destroyed inside, and on the floor crying because they recognize how terrible that is to be separated from God and to do things that are against God's will. You know, for most of us, if we've experienced that about our sins, it probably came because we faced the consequences of our sins. You know, we did something wrong, and then finally, it all kind of played out, and terrible things happened, and we can point back to a moment and say, I know if I did not do that, all of this wouldn't have happened, and we are on the floor and we are weeping, and that's a legitimate place to be. That is the beginnings of godly sorrow. But I think what Jesus is really talking about here is something a little bit further. It's not just because of consequences. It's even the little sins. It's whatever it is that you've done that's against God. It's good sometimes to just stop and to think about those things and to dwell on them long enough until you come to a place where you really are just torn up and disappointed and just distressed with yourself because you know that these things are wrong and you've been okay with them. Maybe you've repented of them and you try not to do them, but overall they don't bother you that much. And to get to that place, because he says those are the people who really receive comfort. And comfort is a word that essentially means someone coming up behind you and they put their arm around you and they're just going to say, this is a worldview that is different than yours, but it is a better worldview. It's a more accurate worldview. It's a way of looking at your problems that's going to change how you think about them. That's the idea of comfort. He says, those who will intentionally take themselves to that place, to see even the smallest of sins at that level, will be able to get up off that floor completely comforted and able to overcome them because God is showing them how things can be so much better. All that Jesus has done to make those things right, the blood that he shed to wash those sins away, and all of the ways that we can get past those and we'll have that comfort. That kind of mourning always leads to the comfort that God so very much wants to give you. And those are the people who, even in life's troubles, feel like they are above life's troubles. Even in life's troubles, feel like they have transcended out of life's troubles. And so, spiritual beggars and deep grievers. But the next level, as we keep climbing this mountain with Jesus, he says in verse 5, he says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And meekness is essentially sort of the idea of being a team player. It's kind of the idea of knowing your place in an organization, knowing that you're a part of something bigger than yourself, and being kind of content to play your role. And so you're not trying to play God and just live life however you want to and act like you kind of have control over what's right and wrong. You know what your place is, and you're content to be there and kind of be that team player, knowing that if the team has a win, right? These are those guys on a basketball team that they're not the star player, right? They're not the one that everyone looks at. But you know, if you took them off the team would kind of fall apart. They're such good support that they need them, and they don't get all the glory. But they know that if the team wins, they win also. That's kind of the idea of meekness. And so he says, blessed are the team players. And the Pharisees and scribes would say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. We step on people to get where we want to go. People who really get above life's problems, who have the wealth to live outside of life's troubles, they do whatever they have to put me first and get whatever it is that we need in order to get to that place. And Jesus says, it would seem that way. But in my kingdom, it's not going to work like that. Those who will be team players, who will put other people first, those are the people who will receive the king's inheritance. And that's what he says, they shall inherit the earth. Or literally, it's the idea of inherit the land. And it goes back to the Old Testament, the land promise of Israel, and saying, there's 2 Psalms that use this phrase, and their point is this: whenever the people, the enemies are all driven out, then we will have inherited the land and have all the peace that comes with that. We'll have all of the protection and the safety and the security and the peace of having no enemies and no troubles to speak of. So it says those who are team players, those are the people that are going to have that kind of peace and security, so that even in life's troubles, you feel that peace. You feel above life's troubles. And then he takes us to the next layer of the mountain. And he climbs to verse 6 and says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. And so he says those who are right cravers, they crave to do the right thing, and they crave for other people to do the right thing. They just want right to be done. And, if you're a Pharisee and a scribe, you're saying that doesn't make sense. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst to be filled with food, to have all the food that they could need, all the water they could need, all of their physical needs met. And so, if we've got to do some kind of shady things to get to that place, that's fine. You think about later in chapter 5 and verse 33, he's going to talk about their oaths. They're making oaths with their fingers crossed behind their backs and saying, oh yeah, I'll do that for you. And then they're benefiting from lying. And whatever it takes to get to that place where you can just have all the physical needs met, those are the people who transcend life's troubles. And Jesus says it doesn't work like that. It's those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Those who are willing to be hungry and thirsty physically, if that's what it takes to do the right thing. They're willing to do the right thing no matter how much it costs them, because doing the right thing is more important than having the physical things that we might need or think that we need in this lifetime. It says those are the people who transcend life's troubles. It seems like they're in life's troubles, but they won't feel like they are, because doing the right thing in those difficult moments says that's what brings that satisfaction, that they will be filled. They'll have satisfaction. They'll have the truest kind of satisfaction, the deep satisfaction of the soul that only doing the right thing as God sees it can bring. And so he carries us up to the fourth level of the mountain. And at this point, maybe he takes a quick break. You got to catch a breather when you're climbing a mountain every now and then. I guess the air gets lighter or something up there. And so you think about these four maybe fit together really well, because they all have this in common. They all talk about how low we see ourselves in relationship to who God is. We are the one who are spiritual beggars, and he is up here. We are the ones who are mourning because of our sins. We're down in the dirt, and he is up here. We're the ones who know we have our place here, and he is up here. We're the ones who we have needs, we have hunger, we have thirst, we have all of these needs. He doesn't have those. He is up here. And so we see ourselves in relationship to him. And it's sort of that irony of the more that you see how low we are in relationship, the more that he lifts us up. We transcend above life's troubles. That's James 4:10, right? Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. He will take you to a place that you cannot get to on your own. And so this is, he's really filling that whole picture of the beggar. It's the Father that lifts the beggar up. He sees you on the street and your helplessness. He lifts you up. He's the one that bathes you, and the one that gives you a peaceful home to live in, a place to be in, a place to belong in, the one that brings you that satisfaction of having a full life spiritually. That's the picture of the first four levels of the mountain. The next four, though, it transitions just slightly in thought to a different kind of focus, but he's still climbing that mountain. So notice then in verse 7, he says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." And so merciful, when we think of it, we tend to think of it as the idea of forgiveness mostly. If I have done something wrong and you forgive me, that's merciful. And that's what mercy is. But the word really has kind of more in mind. It's broader than that. Mercy is really the idea of meeting a need. It's someone who looks for needs. They're looking for needs that other people have. And when they see that need, they assess whether they're able to fulfill it or not. And if they are, then they go ahead and they do that. Even if it costs them some, they're going to go ahead and fill that need. And so you think about the Good Samaritan. He's a guy who saw a need. He was looking for needs. He filled the need. It cost him something, but he filled that need. He was merciful. He didn't forgive anybody, but he was merciful. And forgiveness falls in that because forgiveness is a need. It's a need that anybody has. And so especially if when someone's done wrong. And so it's seeing that need for forgiveness and then fulfilling it. It's kind of how that fits in there. And so he says, if we are going to transcend above life's troubles, he says, blessed are the need fulfillers, the people who look for needs and fill needs when they're able to, for the people that are around them. And again, if you're a Pharisee or a scribe, you're saying, wait a minute, That doesn't make sense. If I'm looking at everybody else's needs, I'm going to be spending my own money, I'm going to be spending my own time. How can I get ahead? How can I transcend above life's troubles with the amount of wealth it's going to take to do that if I'm spending all of my time and money on other people and doing all of those things? And, Jesus would say it might seem that way. But you forget that if you are filling other people's needs, God is noticing that, and he is filling your needs. And that's what he says in verse 7. He says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the people who will forgive others, because they will receive God's forgiveness. But more than that, blessed are those who help other people, because God will help them. He will fill their needs, even as they are filling other people's needs." And so he kind of takes us to that next level. But he continues then into verse 8, and he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And this is really where the mountain gets very interesting, and maybe even a little bit you've reached this emotional level of the mountain. He says, the people who transcend, the people who get to the top of the mountain, where God is, trying to climb up that mountain, are what he calls the pure in heart. And pure in heart has to do with purity is the idea, it's literally the word for clean. And clean, when you're writing to Jewish people, should bring to mind the Old Testament with, the clean sacrifice. You have to have an unspotted one. It's unblemished. And that's a picture for sinless. That's the idea. You gave a clean sacrifice because he's taking on your sins. If he's spotted, he can't take on your sins. He has his own problems. He has to be a clean sacrifice so he can take on the sins. And so it has the idea of something that is unaffected and uninfluenced by sin. But he says it's those who are clean in heart. And heart is the idea of decision making. We think of heart and we think of emotion. And I know I said that. We think of heart and we think of emotions. When they thought of heart, they thought of the seat where you make decisions, the seat where you think about things and decide the actions you're going to take. And so he says, blessed are those who are making decisions. Blessed are those who are making choices that are clean, they're pure, they're uninfluenced by sin. People who are making choices that they don't take into mind their lust and their desires. They're not making choices that might be good in some ways, but also it kind of opens up this door over here that when no one's looking, I have this opportunity to do this thing or whatever, or more obvious than that. They're making choices uninfluenced by sin, and he says it's those people who are blessed. And so how can that be? How can you get ahead in life? How can you transcend and have enough wealth and influence and power if you're making choices uninfluenced by sin? It seems like it's not possible, right? Who are the people in our society who are most known for having the most wealth and power and influence and doing whatever dirty things behind doors that they need to in order to get there? I don't have to say the word politician because everyone's already thinking it. That's what that sort of thing brings to mind instantly. If you want to get to that level, you're going to have to play dirty. That's why people ask the question, could a Christian really be a politician and still be saved? Because it's like, can you really be clean at that level? It doesn't seem like it. Jesus says, no, if you really want to get above life's troubles, you make those kinds of decisions, and those people will see God. That's really the idea of catch a glimpse. They will catch a glimpse of God. And he takes us back to Exodus chapter 24 is really the idea in mind. In Exodus 24, Moses and Aaron and the elders of Israel climb up the mountain so that they can see God. And they reach a certain point that's not quite the top, and the elders are told to stop there. They are found worthy to come to that level, and they can see, it says, the word is escaping me, that you rest your foot on when you're sitting in your armchair, the footrest of God, that idea. They can see the very bottom of his throne, and they have this glimpse, not of all of him, but this glimpse of his glory, this glimpse of who he is, that they can just see the very bottom of it, and there's this height that they've reached, and it's not the very top, but it is very close, and it is a place that worthy people are able to be, because until that point where you're found trustworthy, until that point where you are making decisions, where you're uninfluenced by sin, it's like God is around the corner. He's not going to reveal himself. He's not going to show himself to people who are marred by their love for sin and won't leave that behind. And so he says you reach that point and you're very close to the top. You can see God. You have a relationship with him. You are getting closer. You're not all the way, but you're there. You're close. And then in verse 9, he brings us basically to the top, and he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." And so essentially, he talks here about the idea of people who create peace. They're people who make family, is the idea of they whoever they're around, they try to make family out of whoever it is that they're nearest to, the people that they're closest to, regardless of who they are or what they look like or what they've done to you or anything like that. And so, how can you transcend life's problems if you are going out of your way to make family with anyone and everyone around you? You've got to kind of put some people down. You've got to create conflict if you want to be that high up on the social status. And Jesus would say it might seem that way, but in truth, in his kingdom, it's going to be the people who are peacemakers, who create peace, that are going to be able to transcend life's problems. And he says it's those people who receive the summons to adoption. And I think this really is kind of getting at the point of what the Sermon on the Mount is about, and the climb to the mountain is you started off here at the bottom, completely separated, worse than the servant. You think about the prodigal son. He says, I shouldn't even get to be a servant in your household. I will be lucky just to be a servant in your household. You start off at the very bottom, as far away as you can possibly be. And it's not that you just get to climb to the top. It's that when you get to the top, you get to be adopted into the family. You get to be a part of the whole thing. You get to be one of the members in every possible way. And so it implies acceptance, but it also implies security of inheritance. If you get adopted as the oldest son, you get the double portion. Or if you get adopted as one of the others, you get a portion. You have your security, your future is taken care of, you're provided for. You know that you are safe and secure because you have been made a part of the family. And so he brings you right to the very top, and he says, it can all be completely yours. And you can be above life's troubles because you have everything, spiritually speaking, that you need provided for. And I think this is really kind of the clenching moment of this poem that he says, because it's at this point that people sort of start to think they understand what he's going to say. They're so confused, right? These don't sound like people who have transcended life's problems. They're going through all of these issues. They're mourning and they're weeping and they're having a hard time. How are they the ones who transcend? And Jesus says, but if you can get there, you will be adopted. You'll be a part of the family. And it's like, okay, now we get it. There's going to be this great inheritance that follows. If we can go through these things, then we really will transcend life's problems because we'll really have this physical inheritance. And I think that's the point that he brings them to, so that when you go into verse 10, what you expect is the adoption celebration. I mean, have you ever been in a courtroom when a kid is adopted, or gone to a party afterwards after a kid is adopted? I mean, it's just, there's just such a mood and an excitement, a feeling, a celebration, a joy that to have a family when you didn't have a family before. And so that's what they expect in verse 9. We're adopted. We're going to have this celebration, this inheritance, this security. And so to go then from that into verse 10 and say, blessed are those who are persecuted, is to take the celebration and to completely turn it on its head. You notice it's still a celebration. Jesus, if you'll skip ahead to verse 12, he says, rejoice, be exceedingly glad. He is celebrating their adoption, but not in the way that you anticipated. And he says, now, if you want to transcend life's problems, then you have to be the hunted right doers. Right? You have to be people who live in such a way that you bring life's problems on yourself. That's the idea of being persecuted, is that you are living right, and you will do right no matter what it costs. And if you live that way, people are going to sometimes not like it, and they're going to cause problems in your life. And sometimes they're small, and sometimes they're big, but they're going to bring problems to you because of the way you live. And so, that's Peter talks about that in 1 Peter. It says, don't have problems, don't bring problems on yourself because of evil. sometimes we bring problems on ourselves because we do the wrong thing. That's not what he's talking about here. He's saying sometimes if you live the right way, you will bring problems on yourself because people don't like it when you live the right way. And he says those people are the truly blessed people. Those people have reached the top of the mountain. Those people are in life's problems and bringing life's problems on themselves, but they don't feel like they're in life's problems. They don't feel like they are in any kind of issues. They feel above it. They feel transcended above life's problems. And he says because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And so he ends where he begins. Verse 3, the reward is they own the kingdom of heaven and belong to the kingdom of heaven. Verse 10, they own the kingdom of heaven and belong to the kingdom of heaven. But I think really what Jesus is saying there, literally, it says the kingdom of the heavens. And you could think of it this way. He says the kingdom of the skies. He has taken them up this mountain. He has taken them to the very top where God is. He has taken them and told them how to transcend life problems so they can live in the kingdom that is in the skies. Isn't that what they thought originally? The blessed people are the gods who are up in the sky somewhere, and they've transcended all of life's problems. And he says, you can climb that mountain. You can be there in the kingdom of the skies. You can be in the kingdom that doesn't have any problems, even while you're here, living through the problems. It will seem to you like you're not there. It will seem to you like it's all okay. It will seem fine to you. And you will, he says in verse 12, be rejoicing and be exceedingly glad despite life's problems. Because while you're here,